Hi, yeah, this is just a YouTube advice on how to make an indie show in my experience. So let's begin. My first advice when you're making an indie show, do not go for like a huge idea or project. It will weigh you down, and also you can get the problem of kill your darlings. What does kill your darlings means? It means killing off ideas that don't work in a show, that include plot lines or characters. And why it's called darling is because theoretically a creator loves the ideas but cannot fit it and might actually jeopardize your story. When you're making a story, it's better to go with 3 or 2 ideas instead of like trying to have every idea in one story. They can all make great stories, but if you try to shove everything in, it can be very bad. As well as also cutting out characters that may not attribute to the story that much. Because it's not a good idea to have too many characters, since when making like, believe it or not, if your audience don't know your characters well, it's hard for them to actually care. Even though you personally love these characters, they may not. So ways to fix the too many character problem is actually fusing characters together. And a couple ways to do it is like characters that serve basically the same role, or characters with similar personalities. Like, for example, if in your story, actually I'm going to use Hazbin Hotel, for example. Please don't take me as a VisiPop hater, but I do think she has an issue with too many characters in her story. Like, if I were her, I probably would actually cut a lot of the cast out and have them fuse together. For example, I would probably cut out Carmela and the whole V's and introduce the V's in season 2, because that's when they're very important. And also they wouldn't take away screen time from other characters that probably need it more. I also would take out Mimsy and Cherry Bomb in that series as well. And also Carmela, because the characters are also take too much screen time from other cast members that need more development. And I would also probably fuse Vaggie and Husk together, since they both share a similar role where they both are very grumpy individuals. Or fuse Husk and Nifty, because Nifty doesn't really serve much of a purpose besides comic relief. But yeah, that's an example. Sorry, I'm using another show instead of one of my other shows. But I also have to do that with my shows, since, yeah, I also have that problem with making too much characters. But then also I have to cut them out. So, yeah, that's an easy thing. Though I know a lot of writers hate the advice of like making the story like not going big. And what I mean not going big is that a lot of writers, when they start out, have this idea of like, oh, I want to make like 10 seasons and 8 spin-offs. And I'm like, no, you're gonna like tire yourself out. It's better to have like, okay, 1 season and go for like smaller amount of episodes. You can go for longer, bit more episodes depending, but like, hopefully I'm making sense. It's like better to go smaller and like complete the idea you want to make, instead of like being consumed by the overwhelmingness. Like, trust me, you will get consumed. As well as, like, you know, the whole darling having too much ideas in your story. The other advice I would also recommend, at least when writing characters, is avoid archetypes of characters. Like, avoid archetype writing. Not to say you characters cannot fall into tropes. Heck, a lot of my characters do fall in tropes. Like, Flo is a pretty good example. Like, she clearly falls into the unlike other girls, and she's clearly the tomboy trope. However, she has a lot of things to her that doesn't fall into. She's not like the other girls because she's a girl raised by wolves and wild animals. So she thinks and behaves like a wild animal would think and behave. That's just an example. Not to say you have to, like, if you're making that type of character, make them a wild child. But, like, it's better to have characters that happen to fall into tropes than, like, have them be the trope. Because at least I've seen an issue with, at least more with books, not so much TV shows, but I guess, but more of, like, how hyper-focused they are of, like, characters following, like tropes. And, like, really want to follow those tropes a lot. And, like, do make it clear, there's nothing wrong with have characters follow tropes, but it's better to have characters that happen to fall into those tropes than, like, trying to make it happen. Animation-wise, I would actually recommend, like, practicing the 12 principle of animation before you get started. Because it helped me a lot, knowing the 12 principles. Not to say every piece of animation you have to use all the 12 principles, but it's very important if you want to make your animation look really smooth, is learning about the 12 principle of animation. And it doesn't matter if you're using, like, a simple app like I am using, like EdX Paint. Yes, I'm actually using that to animate. Though this right here is not EdX Paint. Yeah, I'm using a different type of app. I forgot the name of it. Never mind. But, yeah. I also recommend avoiding, like, also another advice I would also advise people is, like, just because a character is unlikable or you hate them does not mean they're badly written. I guess what I mean by this is that I think a lot of creators, not just indie creators, have this bad habit of, like, cutting out characters that the audience doesn't like. And I know at surface level it's like, well, if people don't like this character, then I should cut them out, which that's fair logic depending on the story. But the issue is two things. Is A, you can give your characters character development. And B, like, you can create more conflict with that character and also showcase how and develop other characters. I'm going to use My Little Pony for example, but Zephyr Breeze, he is the absolute like, he's hated for the fandom for a very good reason. But we get more insights onto one of the main characters, Fluttershy. For context, Zephyr Breeze is basically he's a freeloader. In other words, lives with his parents, doesn't do houseworks, tries to hit on her friend who's really not interested, and tells him many times, "I don't like you," in every different language, but he seems not to get it, and super obsessed. He's also rather entitled, and he's quite lazy. Very, very unlikable. However, it does help characterize his older sister being Fluttershy onto why she's like the way she is, and also help create conflicts with other characters. The other show kind of tooks him out because of how many bronies dislike him. Which, on one hand, yeah, it's valid to dislike him. Like, he's not a likable person. And probably if I met him in real life, I would probably want to punch him. Not literally, but, But when it comes to characters, it's okay to have really unlikable characters. Though, I guess it does depend on why people don't like the characters, that more so than, like, if they're disliked. Like, if you purposely, like that writer who purposely made a unlikable character, then yeah, congratulations, you have made a good job. However, someone can dislike a character because they're written like a moral scapegoat, which refers to a character who's written to be worser than another character, so the other character looks better. Which is a massive issue I've seen a lot. At least an issue, I think, because at least a lot of, like, romances I see where the main love interest is somewhat a terrible person, but then, oh, it's okay because this other character is way worser than them, so it's okay they're doing these horrible things. So yeah, I hate that trope. Moral scapegoat, bad trope. Not good. Though, yeah, that's another thing if you're facing, like, oh no, one of my protagonists is unlikable. Instead of, like, giving them moral scapegoats or whoopify them, it's better to give them a character development. And what I mean by this is, like, have them... I'm going to use one of my own writing is Nightmare King. I guess you could argue he's kind of woofified because, yeah, he has a very sad, tragic past on why he acts the way he does. However, he doesn't get a free pass because he has a tragic life. He actually faced consequences for his actions. And have to, like, granted, it's kind of natural because one of the main characters, Henry, has conflicts with him. And they both really don't. But yeah, basically two characters who absolutely hate each other blossom into the greatest bromance of all time. Not literally, but, like, yeah, bromances are great. The other second thing about, like, one issue I've seen a lot when writing, like, really strong characters is that they tend, at least when they're trying to write really strong, cool characters, is that they seem to not want to give them relationships. Partially because, like, at least in my culture, yeah, relationships are seen as a sign of weakness. When actually, relationships should not be seen as weaknesses. Everybody has a relationship. It's not always romantic relationships, mind you, which, do know, it doesn't... it's okay to also give your strong characters romantic relationships, but like one of my main example doesn't like flow again. She's very much a cool, very kick butt type of girl. However, she's very much a loving daughter towards her father and will do anything to protect her father. And that's also another aspect to her character, is her love for her family above herself. She's still a very blunt, doesn't care type of girl, but she's also very loyal to her family. And you can see it with other effective, like, cool characters, like the ghoul from Fallout, who's...